I remember the first time I saw the house. It was raining, the kind of cold, stubborn rain that soaks through your jacket, no matter how thick it is. The clouds hung low over the road like sagging flesh, and the trees on either side of the long gravel drive seemed to lean in, like they were watching. Waiting. My name is Adam Riker. I'm 29, single, and a full-time content creator. Or at least, that's what I tell people when they ask what I do for a living. The truth is, I chase strange things and share them with strangers online. Abandoned asylums, haunted lighthouses, cursed forests. If it sounds like a dare, I've probably filmed it. But this house, Mrcreeps Manor, was different. I didn't find it. It found me. I bought it off a silent auction site, tucked away in the private estates section. There were only 2 pictures, both black and white, both blurry, but something about them gripped me. An old Victorian with spires, broken shutters, and ivy like veins crawling up its skin. The description was 1 sentence long. Former property of Father Elias Mrcreeps. Not responsible for post-sale phenomena. It should have been a red flag. But I saw views. Subscribers. Maybe even a documentary deal if I played it right. And I couldn't resist the price, for $1,000. No questions asked. As the house came into view, my chest tightened. It was bigger than I expected. For stories high, roof sloped like a scowl. The windows stared blankly, as if the house had eyes but no soul. The chimney let out a soft, steady stream of smoke, though I hadn't turned anything on. I told myself it was the wind. I stepped out of the truck and recorded the moment. First look at the new place, I said into the camera, trying to keep my voice steady. This is Mrcreeps Manor, former home of an exorcist, and my next big project. The wind answered with a low whistle. Somewhere, a shutter banged. The front door groaned when I opened it, the sound sharp and strained, like something was being disturbed. Dust filled the air, swirling in the flashlight beam like ash. The walls were papered with old floral patterns, faded and peeling like dead skin. Furniture was still inside, covered in white sheets like ghosts frozen mid-dance. A grandfather clock ticked, even though no one had wound it. I set my bag down and explored the main hallway. Every step I took made the floor groan. The wallpaper in the dining room was bubbled in places, and I noticed odd patterns under it, like someone had painted over something before putting the paper on. I leaned in close, trying to peel a corner, but it held on like it didn't want to let go. I laughed nervously. House is alive, I muttered. Creepy but great for views. Upstairs, the bedrooms were cold, unnaturally cold. One room had no furniture at all, just a single mirror on the far wall. My reflection looked tired, older than I remembered. I turned away. I made a quick dinner from the emergency rations I packed, and set up my sleeping bag in the living room. As I settled in, the fireplace, long and used, crackled softly on its own. I didn't remember lighting it, and I knew for a fact there wasn't any wood inside. I told myself again it was just the wind, just the creaks of an old house settling in. But as I turned off my flashlight and stared into the shadows dancing across the ceiling, a thought kept creeping in. What kind of man needs to seal something in his walls? And why did he stop? I didn't sleep much that night. Something moved behind the wallpaper. I swear I heard it breathing. The first night in the manor was quiet, but not peaceful. I slept on an old mattress I'd dragged into the living room, surrounded by boxes, my toolbox, and 2 LED lanterns that flickered like they were scared to stay on. The air was thick, like the house had been holding its breath for decades, and finally exhaled the moment I stepped inside. Dust danced through the beams of light like little ghosts. I told myself it was just settling, just old wood creaking, just the cold. But that scratching, it started around 3 a.m., soft at first, almost gentle, like fingernails brushing wood behind the walls. Then it stopped. I sat up, held my breath, waited. Silence. Then, just when I was about to lie back down, scratch, scratch, scratch. Behind the wall. Right next to where I slept. I grabbed a flashlight and tapped on the paneling. Nothing. No rats, no squirrels, no movement. Just wood. Old and dry. Great, I whispered to myself, trying to sound amused. Haunted drywall. That'll get views. The next morning, I started working on the hallway. The wallpaper there was ancient, yellowed with time, and stained like it had survived a flood. I planned to rip it all down, record a time-lapse, and maybe throw in some spooky background music for flair. As I peeled back the first long strip, something caught my eye. At first, I thought it was mold, but as more wallpaper came off, I saw them. Symbols. Carved directly into the wall beneath the paper. They were deep. Blackened at the edges. Circles, crosses, shapes I didn't recognize. Some looked like eyes. Others were just jagged lines, like claw marks. And in the center of it all, a long vertical mark, like a nail had been dragged down the wall by someone in pain. Or rage. What the hell? I ran my hand over them. The wood felt oddly warm. Not like sunlight warm, but the kind of warmth skin leaves behind. Unnatural. I peeled more paper away. More symbols. More scratches. Some looked rushed, desperate. Others were so precise, they must have taken hours. It didn't feel like art. It felt like warnings. At the baseboard, I found something stranger. Salt. A thin line of it. Perfectly poured. Undisturbed. I crouched and stared. Who pours salt at the base of a wall and covers it with wallpaper? I filmed a short clip for the video. Called it Weird Exorcist Leftovers. But something in me, something quiet and uneasy, didn't laugh this time. The rest of the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd uncovered something I wasn't supposed to. Not just hidden. Buried. Later that evening, I returned to the hallway with a crowbar, ready to pry open the paneling. Just curiosity, I told myself. Just want to see what's back there. But the moment I touched the wood, the lights flickered. Not the LED lanterns. The house lights. The ones that shouldn't even be working yet, because I hadn't fixed the breakers. And from inside the wall, no louder than a whisper, I swear I heard something that made me freeze in place. It was breathing. Low. Slow. And not mine. I backed away slowly, without turning my back on the wall. My skin crawled. My heart thudded in my ears. That night, I didn't sleep. And the scratching? It never stopped. The attic was worse than I expected. Dust fell in sheets from the rafters as I climbed the crooked steps, each creaking like it hadn't held weight in years. The air was thick, like something had been trapped up here for too long and had grown sour with time. My flashlight beam flicked over broken furniture, a rocking chair with one leg snapped, and old boxes that looked like they hadn't been touched since the Cold War. I came up here because of the sound. A faint thump, then dragging, then silence. I thought maybe raccoons, or worse, squirrels. But what I found was a rusted metal trunk shoved into the far corner under a heavy tarp. The lock was broken. It clicked open with a weak push, and inside were VHS tapes. A dozen of them, all marked in shaky handwriting with nothing but dates. One stood out. It had a red smear across the label. That one read simply, "Do not watch." Of course, I watched that one first. I dug out an old TV with a built-in VCR from the guest bedroom closet. The screen hissed with static as the tape wound up, then flickered into view. The footage was grainy, like it had been shot on an ancient camcorder. The frame shook for a moment, then steadied. There he was. Father Maurik. Younger than I imagined. Pale skin. Thin lips. Eyes that didn't blink enough. He sat in what looked like the same room I'd found hidden behind the hallway. Same warped walls, same cross nailed upside down behind him. He leaned toward the camera like he was afraid it might bite. "If you're watching this," he whispered, "then it's already found you." That sentence hit me hard. Maurik looked behind him, then back at the camera. He was shaking. Not from cold, this was fear. Deep, old fear that had soaked into his bones. The thing in the walls, it's not dead. I couldn't kill it. I tried every rite, every tongue, every blade. It doesn't bleed. It listens. It remembers. And it wants a voice again. He paused and pressed his fingers to his temples, like the words physically hurt to speak. His mouth quivered before he spoke again. "I trapped it here. I used copper nails, salt, and scripture. Not to destroy it, only to seal it. It speaks through dreams, through wires, through wood. Don't tear down the walls. Don't break the copper. Don't," his voice cracked. "Don't let it in." Then static swallowed the screen. I leaned back slowly. My mouth was dry. The whole house felt heavier now, like the air had thickened just enough to notice. The creaking started again, above me this time. But there was no room above me. I was on the top floor. I turned off the tape. Sat in the dark for a while. No camera. No commentary. Just me, and the weight of that warning pressing against my chest. Later that night, while editing, I scanned through my earlier footage, just out of curiosity. Just to make sure I hadn't missed anything weird. At the 14-minute mark, I froze. There was a frame, just one, where something stood at the far end of the hallway behind me. Tall. Thin. No face. Just a smudge of shadow with long fingers brushing the wall. It wasn't there before. I was sure of it. I rewound. Played it again. And again. One frame only. I paused the video and stared at the still image on screen. That wall, the one it touched, That's the one I was planning to tear down tomorrow. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat up with the lights on, listening to the sound behind the walls. The scratching. And now the whispering. I didn't mean to find it. I was tearing down the hallway wall on the second floor, near the old nursery. Dust filled the air, dry and choking, and each time I struck the plaster with the hammer, it released a little burst of stale air that smelled like old paper and something else, something faintly metallic, like blood dried on rusted steel. The wall had looked uneven from the moment I moved in. Not crooked, just off. The kind of off your eyes notice before your mind catches up. So I thought maybe there was water damage or a support beam that had shifted. But when my hammer punched through a weak spot and revealed not insulation, not brick, just darkness, I froze. Behind the broken plaster wasn't a wall. It was a hollow space. I widened the hole with shaky hands. I don't know why I was nervous. I'd been in crawl spaces before. Probably just a forgotten utility gap, I told myself. That's what I kept thinking, until I found the door. It was barely tall enough for me to crawl through. A wooden panel covered in salt lines, painted symbols, and a strip of red cloth nailed above it like a warning. It wasn't nailed shut, though. Just waiting. The air changed the second I opened it. It felt heavier, like stepping into a room underwater. The hairs on my arms rose, and the back of my neck prickled as if a cold breath had brushed my skin. I ducked and crawled inside. The room was small, maybe 6 feet by 6, but every inch of it was wrong. Crosses hung from the ceiling by string. Dozens of them, spinning gently in the still air. Some were wood. Others were iron, their edges jagged, like they had been broken off something larger. Candles, long dead and melted into puddles of wax, sat in a ring on the floor. The wood beneath them was scorched and split. And in the center of the room, a symbol. It had been carved directly into the floorboards. Deep, wide lines in a shape I couldn't recognize. A circle, yes, but broken with sharp angles and branching symbols that reminded me of tree roots or veins. Every corner was stained dark, like something had bled there a long time ago. It didn't feel like a prayer room. It felt like a prison. There were pages glued to the walls. Torn from old Bibles, I think. Most of them were in English, but some were in Latin. I reached for one, curious, and the second my fingers touched the paper, all the crosses stopped moving. Every single one. I backed out fast. The air felt electric, like I was standing too close to a live wire. I stared into the room from the hallway, unsure if I should seal it back up, report it, burn it. My brain was saying leave it alone, but my gut whispered something else. That room wasn't built to keep people out. It was built to keep something in. I filmed none of it. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly to hold the camera steady. And if I'm being honest, part of me didn't want anyone to see it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That night, while I was lying in bed, I heard a sound from upstairs. Not the scratching again. No. This time it was a whisper. A real, clear whisper. It said my name, and it came from the wall. The library was the only place in town that didn't look like it wanted to spit me out. It was a squat, red brick building, half hidden behind overgrown hedges and a fading wooden sign that read, Claremont Public Archives. The windows were stained with years of dust and pollen. A rusty wind chime clinked weakly as I stepped inside, followed by the familiar musty scent of old paper and forgotten time. I wasn't there for books. I was chasing answers. Something was wrong in the house. The scratches behind the walls had grown louder. They followed me now. At night, I could swear they moved from room to room, scratching, pacing, waiting. I'd chalked it up to mice. But then the dream started. The same one. Every night. A whisper in my ear that never finished its sentence. I'd wake up frozen in bed, breathless, heart slamming against my chest like it was trying to break out. So I came here hoping for something, anything on Father Maverick. Maybe an obituary, a news clipping, a file, a clue. The place was nearly empty, except for a frail-looking woman sitting behind the checkout counter. Her silver hair was pinned into a tight bun, and thin glasses balanced at the tip of her nose as she quietly typed on an old computer that looked just as tired as the rest of the building. "Excuse me," I said, approaching the counter. She looked up slowly. Her eyes were sharp, too sharp, and locked onto me like she'd been expecting someone but didn't like who showed up. "I'm looking for information about a man who used to live here. A priest. Name was Maverick. Father Elias Maverick." She didn't answer right away. She stared at me silent, like she was measuring me. Then, finally, she said, "You bought his house." It wasn't a question. "Yes," I replied, a bit uneasy. "I'm renovating it." I do YouTube videos. It's sort of a haunted house series. Her hands stopped moving. The room seemed to grow colder, though I couldn't see why. That's not a house, she said softly. That's a vault. A vault? She stood up. Her back was slightly hunched, but her movements were deliberate. Come with me. I followed her past rows of sagging shelves, deeper into the back where the lights flickered just a little more than they should have. She unlocked a wooden cabinet with a key on a silver chain, and from within it, pulled out a small, cloth-bound journal. Its corners were frayed, and the pages looked like they had soaked in moisture years ago and never fully dried. This is the only thing that survived, she said, handing it to me. The church didn't want it, said it was not approved doctrine. But I kept it. I opened it. The first page was filled with frantic handwriting. Slanted, slashed, panicked. The house is not haunted. It's infected. Walls don't bleed, but this one tries. I sealed it. God forgive me. I sealed it with my son inside. I looked up, my hands beginning to tremble. This is real? The librarian, her name tag said Edith, nodded grimly. He was never just a priest, she said. He was a jailer. He trapped something in that house. Something old. Something clever. But what was it? I asked, flipping through more pages. One had a sketch of the wall I'd demolished, with notes scribbled around it, symbols, placement of copper nails, prayer markings. What was he trying to keep in? Edith didn't answer for a long time. When she did, her voice was barely above a whisper. He called it the Whispering One. I felt a chill crawl across the back of my neck. She continued, It doesn't scream. It doesn't growl. It whispers. Slowly. Patiently. Until your thoughts aren't yours anymore. Until you start wanting to listen. I closed the journal. I shouldn't be in that house, should I? No, she said. But it's too late now. You broke the seal, didn't you? I didn't say anything. You need to burn the rest, she added, her voice low and urgent. Whatever you find in the walls, whatever you hear, do not speak back. Do not record it. And for the love of God, don't post it online. My heart thudded against my ribs. I had already posted 2 videos. She must have seen the guilt on my face, because she stepped back, looked at me like I was already too far gone. Go, she said. I did. As I walked out of that old library, journal in hand, I could swear I heard it again. That whisper. Just below the wind. Not in my ears this time, inside my head. Still unfinished. Still waiting to be heard. I woke up to the sound of boiling water. That didn't make sense. I lived alone. My brain, still groggy from a night of restless sleep, tried to come up with an explanation. Maybe I left the kettle on? Maybe the old pipes were hissing again? The manor had plenty of weird noises, most of which I'd already recorded and laughed off on my YouTube channel. But this sound wasn't the usual creak or whisper. This was deliberate. This was human. I sat up slowly in bed, trying not to make a sound. The early morning light bled through the curtains, casting long gray shadows across the floor. My heart thudded, heavy in my chest. I reached for the flashlight on my nightstand. No weapon, but it felt better than nothing. As I crept down the hallway, I could smell it. Something was burning. Not smoke. More like iron. Like blood. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard it. A chair sliding back. Someone sitting down. I peeked into the kitchen. There, calmly sipping from a chipped white mug, was an old man I had never seen before. He didn't look surprised. In fact, he looked like he'd been waiting for me. His skin was paper-thin and grayish, like worn leather stretched too tight over bone. His eyes were sunk deep, but wide open, unnaturally wide. His hair was slicked back, dark with streaks of silver, and he wore a faded priest's collar under a long black coat that hung like it had absorbed every shadow in the room. Adam, he said, smiling like he knew me. I froze. Who are you? How did you get in here? He didn't answer right away. He took another slow sip from the mug, then gently set it down on the wooden table. This house, he said, voice dry as ash, doesn't need locks. It remembers those it once belonged to. I gripped the flashlight tighter. You're trespassing. I'll call the police. No, you won't. He tilted his head. Because you want to know. You need to know. And I have answers. I stared at him, torn between backing away and lunging at him. But there was something about his eyes that pinned me in place, like I was a photograph and he was holding me still. Who are you? I asked again, quieter this time. My name, he said, is Carlo Mauric. The name hit me like a brick to the chest. Mauric. The same as Father Mauric, the exorcist who used to own this house. The man who left behind prayers, salt, crosses, and rooms sealed in copper and holy water. Your father, I said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Carlo replied. And you've taken his place. He stood now, slowly, like his bones hurt with each movement. He stepped closer. Not threatening. Just unnaturally calm. He thought he could bury it forever, Carlo said, his eyes drifting toward the wall I hadn't broken yet. But the thing behind the stone doesn't sleep. It only waits. And now, you've woken its hunger. I stepped back, heart pounding. What do you want? Me. He smiled again, wide and empty. Nothing. I've been here long enough. Watching. Listening. Feeding. His eyes flicked to my camera on the counter. You've given it new eyes. A new voice. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice rising. What is it? Carlo blinked slowly. It has no name. Names are for things with souls. I opened my mouth to respond, but then I blinked. And he was gone. No footsteps. No sound. Just gone. The mug still sat on the table. Steam still curled from it. I didn't drink it. I didn't touch it. I backed out of the kitchen, locked the door behind me, and sat in my bedroom for hours, listening for footsteps that never came. That night, I played the footage from the hallway camera. In the frame, me walking down the stairs. Then behind me, just for a split second, the edge of a black coat disappearing into the wall. I don't know what it was about that particular hallway, but something in my gut kept telling me to leave it alone. It was narrow, barely wide enough to stretch my arms. The wallpaper here was different. Older. Faded. The smell, too, like rotting wood and cold iron. For days, I kept ignoring it, working on other parts of the house, but every night the scratching would return, and it always came from behind that wall. I finally gave in. With a crowbar in one hand and my camera in the other, I pressed the record button and took a deep breath. This is the last wall, I said out loud, more for myself than my viewers. Let's see what Father Maurik was hiding. The first few strikes felt normal. Dust flew. The plaster cracked. But underneath, I didn't find insulation or old brick. I found metal. Rows of thick copper nails lined the wooden boards in perfect symmetry, like someone had painstakingly sealed something in. Not sealed. Trapped. I hesitated, staring at the cold metal. My heart thudded in my chest. A part of me whispered, walk away. This isn't yours to touch. But another part, the stubborn, curious side that had brought me here in the first place, told me to keep going. I pulled the nails out one by one. Each one came out with a metallic scream, like the house itself didn't want me to continue. After the last nail clattered to the floor, I pried away the boards. Behind them was a small chamber. No wider than a closet. The air inside was dead still. No breeze, no smell. It was wrong, like the air hadn't moved in 100 years. I stepped closer and shone my flashlight into the darkness. That's when I saw it. A stone altar stood at the center, blackened with age and soot. On top of it, curled and twisted, was what looked like a skeleton. But it wasn't laid down in peace. No, it had been bound, tightly, with rusted barbed wire, wrapped so many times that the bones had cracked under pressure. My breath caught. The flashlight trembled in my hand. There were symbols on the walls, carved deep into the wood. Not just scratches, but letters. Ancient ones. I didn't recognize any of them, but they made something cold stir in my chest. The bones weren't human. Not quite. The skull looked stretched, longer than normal. And the teeth, too many of them, all filed into points. I backed away. My camera suddenly blinked off with a faint beep. Dead battery. It had been fully charged that morning. The silence in the chamber deepened. My ears began to ring, like pressure was building behind them. I turned to leave, heart hammering, but just before I stepped away, I heard it. A breath. Not mine. It came from the chamber. Low. Wet. Ragged. I froze. Every muscle in my body went stiff. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But I couldn't even move. Then I felt it, cold fingers brushing the back of my neck. I spun around, flashlight flailing. Nothing there. But the altar, the skeleton, it had shifted. The head was tilted now. Facing me. I dropped the flashlight and ran. I didn't stop until I was outside the house, gulping the cold forest air like I'd been drowning. The manor loomed behind me, quiet again. Still. But something had changed. I knew it. I had broken the seal. I had opened a door that was never meant to be touched. And whatever was inside was awake. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening. At first, it was just the creaking of the old house, the wind brushing against the windows. But sometime after 2 a.m., I heard it again. The breathing. It wasn't mine. It wasn't from outside. It came from inside the walls, slow, heavy like something sleeping, deep and ancient, just on the other side of the plaster. I held my breath to make sure I wasn't imagining it. But the sound kept going in and out like someone, or something, was sleeping right above my head. I got up and grabbed my flashlight. The hallway outside my bedroom was darker than usual. It always smelled like dust and old wood, but tonight, there was something new in the air. A strange, metallic scent, like rusted iron. I followed the sound. It was faint but steady. Breathing. It led me to the hallway where I'd found the hidden prayer room. The crucifixes I had left hanging on the wall were all on the floor now, every single one of them turned upside down. The nails were still in the wall, bent outward as if someone had yanked them with force. My flashlight flickered. I tapped it, and the light steadied. I don't know what made me do it, curiosity, fear, some stupid instinct, but I placed my ear against the wall. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a whisper. Faint. So close. I jerked back and stumbled. My flashlight slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor, the light rolling in circles across the hallway. Then I saw it. A shadow. Just for a second. At the far end of the hallway, standing at the edge of the light's reach. It didn't move. It didn't speak. But I could feel it watching me. My skin prickled all over. I stood frozen, heart slamming against my ribs. The light finally rolled to a stop, and in that stillness, I blinked. It was gone. I picked up the flashlight with shaking fingers and backed away, not turning my back to the hallway until I was inside my bedroom, door locked, heart pounding like a drum. The next morning, I checked the camera footage from the night before. I always leave one rolling in the living room while I sleep, partly for content and partly for peace of mind. Around 2:11 a.m., the camera picked up something. At first, it's just the dark room. Then the static, brief and sharp. And then, barely visible in the shadows behind the sofa, something moves. A tall shape. It doesn't walk. It just shifts, like smoke folding into itself. For a full minute, it stands there, watching the camera, watching me. I paused the video and stared at the frozen frame. The shape had no face, just blackness where a face should be. My phone buzzed. A notification from the new video I'd uploaded that morning. I clicked it. One of the top comments read, "Who's the figure standing behind you at 17:06? I skipped to the timestamp. There I was talking to the camera, explaining the prayer room I'd found and the strange symbols. Behind me, in the far corner of the frame, something moved. A dark, tall shape. It didn't make a sound. It didn't come close. It just stood there. Still. Patient. I slammed the laptop shut and backed away from the desk. The house was silent now. Too silent. I realized something then. Something I hadn't wanted to admit before. It wasn't just the walls. It wasn't just the past. Whatever was in this house, it had noticed me. And it wasn't going back to sleep. I didn't sleep that night. Even after sealing the prayer room back up and duct taping the gaps in the walls where the cold kept leaking through, I knew something had changed. The air felt thicker, heavier, like the house was breathing alongside me. I sat on the edge of the mattress on the living room floor, the only room left untouched by whatever was happening. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the footage from the day before. Frame by frame, I tried to convince myself it was just bad wiring, or mold, or paranoia. But in one clip, right when I opened the chamber behind the copper-sealed wall, the screen glitched. For a second, I saw a shape. No, not even a shape. Just a space where something should have been, but wasn't. A hole in the world. And then he came back. It was around 2:12 a.m. when the front door creaked open. I hadn't locked it. I should have. But part of me, some quiet, exhausted part, knew who it would be. Carlo. He walked in slowly, like a man stepping back into his childhood home. Except there was no nostalgia in his eyes, only hunger. His coat was wet from the rain, and mud clung to the bottom of his shoes, but he walked as if he didn't feel any of it. "You opened it," he said softly, his voice almost proud. I didn't answer. My hands were clenched so tightly my nails had drawn blood from my palms. Carlo looked around the room. Father kept it sealed with copper and prayer. For decades. All that suffering, all that noise trapped behind brick. But you, he smiled, and I hated that smile. It looked too stretched. Too satisfied. "You knew," I said. "You knew what was back there." Carlo nodded. "Of course. I was the first one it whispered to." He sat across from me, on the other side of the coffee table. I noticed the way his fingers twitched, as if something inside him was moving without his permission. You think he was a hero, my father, Carlo continued, running his hand over the wood grain. But he wasn't. He didn't cast the demon out. He didn't defeat it. He made a deal. A binding. With me as the vessel. As the cage. You, my throat was dry. You were the sacrifice. He smiled again. The host. I wanted to run. I wanted to get up and bolt out of the house, into the woods, into the storm, anywhere but here. But something in Carlo's eyes rooted me in place. He buried me alive behind those walls, he said, his voice soft, almost tender. Kept me breathing just enough to keep it sleeping. But I never stopped hearing it. The whispers. The promises. It told me what it really wanted. What? He leaned in. A voice, he whispered. A tongue. A vessel that could move. Could record. Could reach beyond these rotting walls. I understood then. The camera. My videos. My channel. You used me. No, Carlo said gently. It did. I'm just a bridge. A chill rolled down my spine. All those strange uploads. The corrupted footage. The way the shadows never moved quite right. My subscribers commenting on seeing someone in the background. Someone I never noticed. It had never been about the house. It was about what I was showing the world. You're the signal now, Carlo said. You opened the chamber. You spoke the words. It's awake, Adam. And it wants to be heard. Something creaked above us. Not like a house settling. Not like wind. This was deliberate. A step. Carlo looked up and smiled wider. It's almost here. I stood, knocking the table over between us. I'm not helping you, I said. I'll burn this house to the ground. He chuckled. You think that matters now? You think fire can stop what's already inside you? I backed away slowly toward the hallway. Toward the prayer room. I had to find the journal again. I had to undo this. You were chosen, Adam, Carlo called after me. Just like I was. We don't get to choose what carries the voice. I slammed the door behind me and ran. The prayer room was freezing. The candles I'd found days ago were lit again, flickering with no flame. The journal was still under the floorboards, but now the pages were filled with words I didn't recognize, yet somehow understood. And in the silence, I heard the walls breathe again. But this time they said my name. The air in the house had grown thicker. Every step I took felt like walking through syrup, every breath like I was inhaling smoke that wasn't there. I hadn't slept in 2 days. I didn't even know if it was day or night anymore. The windows wouldn't let in light. The clocks had stopped. My reflection didn't follow my movements anymore. I was no longer afraid. I was exhausted. I had to find out what Carlo wanted. I had to find out what Maurik had done. It happened when I ripped up the warped floorboards in the prayer room. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. My mind was numb, my hands moving without thought. But beneath the wood, tucked inside a rusted metal box sealed with melted wax, I found the truth. Maurik's real journal. Not the torn pages the librarian gave me. Not the safe, vague records I found in his study. This one was different. The cover was scorched black. Inside, the pages were brittle, stained with something darker than ink. And the writing, it wasn't all his. The first few pages were in Maurik's shaky script. But deeper in, the words grew sharp, angry. Almost burned into the paper. As if the ink had been made from something alive. I sat on the floor and read until my hands shook. Maurik had never meant to pass this house on. He wasn't just an exorcist, he was a vessel. He'd sealed the demon inside with his own blood. But it was his son, Carlo, who paid the full price. They had summoned something ancient. Something older than language. They called it the Whispering One. It didn't just possess people. It lived through them. Spoke through their mouths. Saw through their eyes. And worst of all, it spread through sound. Through video. Through screens. That's why the house was full of cameras. That's why Carlo needed me. I had given it an audience. Every upload. Every view. Every curious click. I wasn't just unlocking something, I was sharing it. There was more. The final ritual didn't need a willing host. It needed an amplifier. Someone to carry the words and images out of the house. Someone foolish enough to turn horror into content. Me. At the bottom of the journal, scribbled over and over again in red ink, were 5 words. Stop filming. Stop showing them. But it was too late. The floor trembled beneath me. Somewhere below, I heard chanting. Low. Wet. Like words spoken through a mouth full of mud. I knew where it was coming from. The basement. I grabbed a rusted iron crucifix from the prayer wall and followed the sound. Down the hall, through the old servant stairs. The deeper I went, the more my vision blurred. The air stung my skin like tiny needles. Then I found it. The ritual room. It was circular, lined with mirrors that didn't reflect anything. The floor was carved with symbols that pulsed like they were breathing. In the center stood Carlo. Shirtless, eyes rolled back, whispering to himself in a language that made my teeth ache just to hear. He didn't look surprised to see me. "You brought them," he said, smiling. "They're watching now, aren't they?" I wanted to speak, to demand answers, but my voice wouldn't come. The room swallowed every sound I made. "You made them watch," Carlo said. "You built the bridge." He raised his arms, and the symbols glowed red-hot. Then he pointed at me. "They chose you." Something behind the mirrors moved. Not a reflection. A shape. Thin, tall, stitched together with shadows. Its face was blank, but I could feel its stare. It leaned forward, toward me. Toward the camera in my pocket. Toward the lens it wanted to crawl through. I remembered the journal. Maurik had written a reversal. A counter-ritual. I fumbled it out of my jacket with shaking fingers and began to read. My voice cracked. My mouth tasted like metal. Carlo screamed, the room shook, and the lights exploded one by one. The mirrors shattered. And for a moment, the room went silent. The figure hissed, a sound like static. Then it vanished. Carlo fell to his knees, gasping. His eyes, no longer white, just terrified. The walls began to bleed. The floor cracked open. I didn't stay. I ran. Through fire. Through screams. Through a house collapsing on itself. But I kept the camera. I didn't upload anything. At least, I don't remember uploading it. I don't remember walking into the basement. One moment, I was in the upstairs hallway with the journal clutched to my chest, the pages sticking to my sweaty palms. The next, I was standing on the stone steps, staring down at that hidden chamber behind the broken wall. My camera gear was long gone. This wasn't for views anymore. This was survival. The air was thicker now, like breathing through smoke. And yet, there was no fire, only a cold, bitter smell that reminded me of damp earth and something older, something dead. The walls, once brick and wood, now pulsed slightly, like they had veins just beneath the surface. I could hear them, whispering, breathing, laughing. The altar stood in the center, unchanged. Barbed wire wrapped the skeleton like a cruel net, but even that seemed to twitch now and then. A low hum filled the room, vibrating my bones. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. Carlo stood behind the altar, barefoot, shirtless. His chest was covered in carved symbols, each one dripping with fresh blood. His eyes weren't just bloodshot, they were bleeding. Trails of red tears marked his cheeks like war paint. "You came," he whispered, smiling through cracked lips. "It chose you." "I'm not finishing anything," I said. My voice was thin, cracking. "I'm ending this." Carlo laughed, and it wasn't human. It echoed off the walls like something laughing inside my own skull. He raised both arms and spoke words I didn't understand. Not Latin. Not any language I'd ever heard. They weren't meant for people. The walls groaned. The skeleton on the altar jerked once, then again. The wire tightened around it, slicing into the brittle bones. Something invisible pulled at the body, like it was being filled with smoke. The air turned black in places, rippling, swirling. And then I saw it. It didn't step from the shadows. It was the shadows. It formed out of the corners of the room, growing legs, a torso, arms far too long, hands with too many fingers. No face. Just skin stretched where a face should be, and under it, mouths. Rows of mouths whispering words I couldn't hear but still understood. It had waited. Waited to be seen again. Waited for someone like me. I fell to my knees and fumbled for the journal. I flipped the pages with trembling hands until I found it. Maurik's final entry. Scrawled in desperate strokes, nearly torn through the page. "If it awakens, read this aloud. No matter what you see. No matter what it offers." I began to read. The words fought my tongue. Each syllable tasted like ash. My vision blurred. The thing turned to me. Its head tilted. One of its many mouths curled into a grin. My ears filled with screams, not mine, not Carlo's, but 100 others. Maybe thousands. The voices of everyone it had ever touched. Carlo shrieked. His body lifted off the ground, flailing. The ritual had turned on him. He tried to speak, to beg, but his mouth was full of black smoke. His arms twisted, snapping at the elbows. Bones cracked like branches. The thing didn't need him anymore. It wanted me. I screamed the final words. There was a sound, like air being sucked out of the world. The walls shuddered. The floor cracked. Fire erupted from the altar, not red, but white-hot, bright enough to blind. The thing screamed then, and its scream was the sound of every dark thought a person has ever had. It collapsed inward, folding into itself like it had never been real. Carlo dropped to the floor, nothing but a burnt husk. I ran. I didn't grab anything. I didn't look back. I ran through the shaking house as flames spread through the walls. The breathing stopped. The whispers vanished. But the house groaned, angry, betrayed. It had been a prison, and I had torn it apart. By the time I stumbled outside, the sky was gray with smoke. Flames licked through the broken windows behind me. Mrc Manor, the cursed home I had mocked on video, was dying. And I knew it wasn't going quietly. As I stood in the clearing, watching the house burn from the inside out, I felt something in my chest shift. Like a door quietly clicking open. I thought it was over. I really did. I stood outside the burning wreckage of Mrc Manor, breathing smoke and ash. The house screamed as the flames chewed through its rotting bones. The roof gave in with a thunderous crash, sending embers spiraling into the sky like angry fireflies. I didn't move. I couldn't. My legs were numb, my hands still shaking from the final words I'd forced out of my throat, words I never knew before that night. Carlo was gone. Whether he'd been pulled into the void or devoured by the thing he once tried to control, I didn't know. I didn't care. I was alive. Or at least, not dead. The firefighters came hours later. They asked questions, but I just mumbled about faulty wiring. No one pressed too hard. This town knew the manor was cursed. They'd always known. I think they were just glad it was gone. I moved into a small apartment a few towns over. Quiet place. White walls. No creaks, no shadows. Just silence. For the first time in weeks, I slept. And I dreamed of nothing. But peace is a liar. A few days after the fire, I opened my laptop. My channel's dashboard had a new notification. New video uploaded. The truth beneath Mrc Manor. I stared at the screen, confused. I hadn't uploaded anything. I hadn't even touched the camera since that night. My hands hovered over the keyboard. A cold, invisible hand pressed gently against the back of my neck. I clicked play. The footage was in 4K. Crisp. Steady. Too steady. It showed the hidden room behind the wall, the skeleton on the altar. My voice narrated the scene, though I don't remember saying those words. And here it waits, my voice said smoothly, for a doorway. For a vessel. For you. The screen went black. Then, frame by frame, symbols flickered, barely visible. Ancient runes. Twisting, pulsing. They bled into each other like veins. The comments started rolling in within minutes. This gave me chills. Why did I hear whispering from my speakers even when the video was muted? Did anyone else see a face at 12:03? I had a dream last night. He was in my room. I tried to delete it. The platform wouldn't let me. Every time I clicked remove, the screen flashed, white for just a second, and then the video reappeared, locked in place. I shut the laptop and threw it under the bed. I told myself not to think about it, to move on. But last night, I heard scratching again. Not from the walls. This time, it came from the screen. A soft, steady scrape, like nails dragging across glass. I walked to the bathroom, splashed water on my face, looked in the mirror, and there I was. Only, I didn't blink when I did. I stared into my own eyes, and they stared back, unblinking, with something else behind them. Watching. Smiling. It's not over. And deep down, I think it never was. I didn't just let it out. I brought it with me.